Hello, welcome to the SuiteWorld session titled Your Live What Now? The Role of an Internal Business Systems Function. For those of you on this call that are part of an IT department or an internal business systems department, as I'll call it, hopefully from this session we'll talk through, what are the different factors and things that you need to be considering and thinking about to get the most out of your NetSuite environment after you're live. For those of you who are CEOs, CFOs, COOs, or other leadership positions, hopefully as we go through this session, you'll leave with a better understanding of, okay, it's one investment to get live on a platform, but then here's all of the other opportunity we have to really leverage that platform for the best strategic and operational benefits of your company. So whether you're IT department or leadership, I do hope you'll get a lot out of the next 19 minutes here. Before we get too deep into it, though, as this is a SuiteWorld presentation, we will start with a safe harbor statement. I will give everybody, here 10 seconds or so to review this. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the core of the presentation. And to do that, I want to start by telling you a little bit about my personal journey in business systems, because I think that's going to set the stage really well for what we're trying to talk through as we go through this session. So as it says on the slide, I'm Ben Kramer. I'm a managing director at Crow, the 9th largest accounting firm in the United States and worldwide. And I spent my entire career in our business systems group. I spent maybe first half decade implementing Microsoft ERP solutions, and then spent the last half decade working here with Oracle NetSuite. Now, in my personal journey, I started the first 7 years just doing net new implementations, right? Working with customers like yourself when you decided to go with NetSuite and helping you go from your legacy system to get live on NetSuite and be there for the first month or two after you were live, right? A classic implementation role. The problem I had, though, is after 7 years of doing that, I started getting a little disgruntled because I looked at it and, it felt like the net new implementation, when you first get live, it's like, yes, we got value, but in a lot of ways, we just replaced the legacy system. But now we have this super powerful platform of Oracle NetSuite, or back in my Microsoft days, Microsoft, right? You have this super valuable platform, but I felt like the majority of my customers are only getting 30 or 40% of that theoretical value that they could get. And that led me to get focused on saying, okay, well, let's not just think about initial go live. Let's think about once we're live, how do we leverage these platforms to really get the most for our company on a go forward basis? And that's been my pure focus here the last 3 years at Crow. So before we get into the actual granular details about what we at Crow believe an internal business systems function ought to be doing to get the most out of your platform, before we get into those details, let's take a step back and let's look at two large macro trends in the business system space that have been happening over the last decade or so that really make a big difference as to how we view what your IT or business systems department really should be doing for you. First of those is Evergreen. The second of those is around Agile and how we think about improving, systems, how we think about improving software for use. So the first big trend we want to hit on is on Evergreen, right? It used to be, when you go back to the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, right? When you were thinking about a business systems platform, you would buy an ERP, you would go implement an ERP, and you would implement it under the mindset that you were going to keep it for 5, maybe 10 years. And in 5, maybe 10 years, then you would switch to another ERP. Why? Largely because the softwares back then were all versioned, right? If you went live on, I'll pick on Microsoft, if you went live on AX 2009, by the time 2012 came around, there was a whole new version of the software, and you were on an outdated version. And by the time 2015 came around, 2009 version was no longer even supported, so you had to re-implement a whole new version. Now, NetSuite's been doing this forever with Evergreen, right? But now the entire market has changed to what we call an evergreen approach versus the old implement and forget approach, where Evergreen is saying, hey, the software platform you get on will always be the most up-to-date version, and it will just keep updating every 6 months. NetSuite's been doing this 20 years, but the rest of the ERP market only started doing this in the last couple of years. And because of that, that's like really changed some mental models, right? As the rest of the business systems ecosystem goes to the approach that NetSuite's been doing for decades, that's now starting to change how we think about what an IT department should do, not just in NetSuite, but across the board in business systems. Okay? So Evergreen's a big one out there that's changing. The other big factor that they see at a macro level that IT departments and leadership need to consider when they think about their business system is all around this concept of agile, right? Agile Scrum, or all the different variations that come with agile. But the general thought is, out in Silicon Valley for the last 20 plus years, they said, hey, when we're building a software product, we're not just going to sit and go in a dark room, go and build it and release it and say the product is done, right? Instead, in Silicon Valley for again, a good 20 years now, they've been saying, no, what we want to do is have a product, have a solution, but then we want to continuously improve that solution. So every 2 weeks or every month or whatever their cycle is, we want to keep going through and adding more and more and more and making our product better and better and better, right? And initially that was only viewed for software companies, right? And it's stayed that way for a long time. But what we're starting to see now in the market is that boardrooms, whether it's private equity groups, whether it's venture capital groups, whether it's C-suites, whether it's family-owned businesses on down, are now starting to say, okay, well, when we think about our business and our business systems of how we're running our day-to-day business, should we be thinking about this in more of an agile approach where every single month I want to see improvement on our business systems? I want to see that we're making progress every single month, just as the software companies have been doing. And that mindset shift is saying, okay, agile is not just for pure software development, but also for managing software products, of which your business systems environment is a software product for your company. That mindset has changed, and we're seeing those pressures. Okay? So if we think about that together, if I just go back here, Evergreen is here to stay. Agile is more and more mainstream and requested in organizations. Let's keep those two factors in the back of our mind. And now let's transition into the more tactical approach, right? So sure, yes, Evergreen or systems changing. Yes, we always want improvement. But how does that justify your investment, right? If you're a leadership person on this call, a C-suite type person on this call, you might say, well, how much money should I be investing in my business systems group? What's the ROI on my business systems group? On the flip side, if you're a business systems or an IT person, you're probably saying, well, a lot of my work isn't even about ROI, right? A lot of my work is just stuff I have to do to keep the lights on, right? It's just a fixed cost center. So we at Crow have been, heavily invested in post-go-live work now for the last 3 or 4 years. And we at Crow have broken it down and saying, okay, everything that a business systems function needs to do, in our viewpoint, is going to fall into one of these following 5 categories of work. And each of these categories of work have very different characteristics of how the work gets into the queue to be done, has very different characteristics of how we think about a cost benefit on it, has very different characteristics as to who is bringing it, right? Whether that's the platform, whether that's end users, whether that's the executives within your company themselves, right? So we'll go through all 5 of these here in detail, but the 5 categories that we put in all of this after go live business systems function work is in maintenance, in support, in what we call ergonomic optimizations, in what we at Crow call strategic optimizations, and in what we at Crow call release optimizations. We expect that an internal business systems function, or your IT department, as you might more colloquially call it, is managing all 5 of these categories of work for you and your business to help drive your business systems forward. So before I elaborate too much on the overall, let's get into some definitions of how we at Pro view this and how we view this specifically now in terms of NetSuite, how we view this about what that business systems function ought to be doing. First category of work, maintenance, right? So at Pro, when we say maintenance, what do we mean, right? Maintenance to us means it's work we got to do to keep up with the versioning of the system, right? This work is prompted not really by end users, not really even by the platform, although you could say in some cases by the platform. It's primarily prompted by time, right? These are ticking time work, right? We're hours so much time, we've got to go back and do that work. But on maintenance, you say, okay, well, what's the value add of doing maintenance? Well, it's very, very difficult to sit down and to do an ROI calculation on maintenance. If I flip this, before we get into the actual details here of what does this mean in NetSuite when we say maintenance, if I flip this to a conceptual model, it might be easier for everybody on the call to understand, right? If we think about your automobile, right? What's the cost benefit of getting an oil change? I mean, you have to do it. I mean, you're supposed to do it, right? Every 3 to 6 months or so many miles. But what's the cost benefit there? I don't know, but you should do it. Everyone agrees you should do it. But there's very long-term considerations if you don't, right? What's the cost benefit of rotating your tires, right? Neither of those are prompted by an emergency. Neither of those are prompted because something broke. They're just maintenance. So when we think about that in terms of a NetSuite example, what type of different work would we categorize as maintenance that your business systems function that you need to be doing inside your environment? Well, one, sandbox refreshes, development environments for those of you who have heavy suite script in your environment or heavy integration in your environment, leveraging development environment. But how are we refreshing those sandbox and development environments for that ongoing dev? Something we need to do periodically, right? How are we going through on the biannual release, right? And how are we doing regression testing on the biannual release, right? How are we doing new feature previews for the new annual release? Whether that's from NetSuite, whether that's from the other add-in solutions like FAM, like WMS, like other third parties, okay? But it's not all just environment or release work, which again, there is a fair bit of work here to do, but it's also maintainability, right? So if we think about this again, like you're rotating your tires, right? Over time, people add save searches and save searches and save searches to at some point, you've got 15 different save searches that are all pulling the same result, except some of them have slightly different columns and slightly different data. Well, that's a risk to your business, right? Because now that messiness, if someone goes and runs the wrong one that's very similar to another, that's going to cost, right? So how do we keep those lists small? How do we go through and make sure all the scripts that you have running are actually scripts that are useful, right? How do we make sure the scripts are written in the versions that are supported, right? The old 1.0 versus the new 2.0 versus new 2.1, 2.x, etc. How are we keeping up to date with that? Again, there's no short-term cost to that. But if you have everything in 1.0 and you haven't converted any of it, it's going to be more costly to go find a SuiteScript developer that changes in the future. Other things that we see in maintenance usage, right? How are we going through and making sure your roles and permissions and your segregation of duties, right, are staying in line with top class, Sarbanes-Oxley, and SOX control? Again, a maintenance item. So lots of work here for your business systems function to do, but just like an oil change, it's never urgent. But by golly, if we're not doing maintenance, it's going to catch up with us eventually. Compare that now to the second category of work that we see internal business systems functions doing that we call support, right? So we at Pro, when we say support, we mean something a little bit different. To us, support means fixing something that was broken, right? Something that was previously there, delivering work, delivering value, that's no longer delivering that value. For support work, that is prompted by an end user, right? Where they say, hey, I used to be able to do this and now I can't do this. And again, with support, just like maintenance, it's very hard to calculate what value are we as a business getting, because it's just something that's broke that has to fix, right? When you're driving your car and a headlight goes out, replacing that headlight, what's the value of doing that? When you get a flat tire, what's the value of replacing that flat tire? Well, you have to do it. Is it making you better off than before the headlight went off? Is it making you better off than before the tire went flat? No, it's not. It's just getting you back to that same steady state, right? So those are support tickets. We have to do them. They're unplanned. And, but yeah, your business systems has to do it. Otherwise, your users get degraded system. So if maintenance and support are maybe, more mundane tasks, still important, but more mundane tasks, the third category that we have at Crow is now going to get us into the optimization side. And this first type of optimization is what we call an ergonomic optimization. Now, to us, what's an ergonomic optimization? There's three key factors to it, right? One, it's work we do to improve an end user's day-to-day interactions with your business systems. It's prompted by an end user, someone who's actually doing the job is prompting it, and there's a clear cost-benefit calculation. We can sit down and say, this user is complaining that they have to go to 5 different screens to enter this one transaction. And if we go and build a single screen where they can enter all the data once and press OK, that will save them X amount of time every day. Therefore, investing this much cost to build that single screen is justified in how much time it's going to save the end user. That's what we would call an ergonomic optimization. Why do we call it ergonomic? Because it's designed for the efficiency or comfort of the person actually doing the work in the system. Now, ergonomic optimizations are very rarely urgent, right? But there is a definitive, clear value add to doing it. They're small in scope, they're not necessarily strategic, but boy, you can sit there and do the math and say, yes, it makes sense to invest that cost to provide this feature, that function to this end user to make their life easier or better. Now, that leads us to our fourth category of internal work that we call strategic optimizations. Strategic optimizations are going and changing your business systems environment or changing your NetSuite environment to assist with your company strategy. Maybe your company strategy is to go and get more dependency on your customers. Make your customers more dependent on you. Increase the switching cost that they have if they were ever to leave you as a vendor. These strategic optimizations like that are trying to increase the switching costs for anyone to leave you, right? These are with the company strategy. The company strategy is coming from your executive team, right? Where they're sitting out and saying, hey, how do we make the company more profitable as a whole? Okay, increasing switching costs on our customers will make us more profitable because we can drive better deals, better negotiations, whatever, right? They're the ones driving that strategy. Now, they've just driven a strategy, for example, switching costs, okay? Making it harder for your customers to leave you. Well, what might that mean for your business systems department? Well, if your business systems department was saying, okay, we want to increase switching costs, one of the things we might do is go and integrate much heavier with our customers, right? Maybe for us, it's not that hard to send a paper invoice, right? But we integrate with our customers to send all of our invoices over EDI because our customers like that. So that way, when they're considering the switch from us to another vendor, and that other vendor they don't have EDI configured with yet, they would say, oh, wow, well, it's going to cost me some money if I switch to this other vendor because I'll have to go through the whole EDI setup with them again, and I already have all this set up with your company. Okay, I'll just stay, right? Or at least it's a factor in encouraging them to stay. So that's what I mean by a strategic optimization, is to go and, for example, switch from paper invoices to EDI invoices with a customer, not for your AR team's sake, but for keeping that customer more sticky. And why do I say that that's unclear ROI? Is because the whole strategy that your board put together probably has an ROI or some estimate of an ROI. But the ROI specifically on having your business systems function go through and make that change to do EDI with the customer, how do you value that? How do you put a dollar amount on that? Especially because the EDI is probably only one component of the switching costs. Probably legally, we're changing contracts to be more long-term. We're doing marketing's doing a bunch of things, sales are doing a bunch of things to increase switching costs. And this part that your business systems function doing is just one small piece of that strategy. That's why we say strategic optimizations are coming from executives. They're specifically there for your strategy, but they themselves often have very unclear what's the direct ROI. The fifth and final category of internal business systems work that we see is what we call release optimizations. Release optimization, if a ergonomic optimization is prompted by an end user and a strategic optimization is prompted by your executives, release optimizations are going to be prompted by your platform provider. For everybody in this call, it's going to be prompted by NetSuite. Right? This is work that we should do to stay up with the current platform, right? ROI in this case is never short term. This is a very, very long term consideration, saying, hey, the platform is starting to move in this direction, whether it's changes on how they do on-hand inventory, whether it's changes in WMS, whether it's changes in advanced manufacturing, and we don't have to adopt that right now. There may be some good value in adopting it right now, but over time, we need to start moving in the way that the platform's moving, because if we don't, then we're going to, over the long run, we will end up using features and functions that aren't as well adopted, that aren't as well supported as other areas of the system, and we'll be missing out on that new value, right? So that's the fifth category, release optimizations prompted by NetSuite to stay there versus, again, strategic, which is prompted by your executive team to stay in line with your strategy, versus the ergonomic, which is prompted by your end users and has a very clear, immediate ROI, versus support, that's there to get you back to your steady state, versus maintenance, which is there to keep the system healthy. So I say that and say, okay, well, those are great 5 categories of work, Ben. That's really cool. But what do I do with that, right? I should be expecting my business systems team to be doing all of that, even though I'm live. But how do I actually go about handling it, right? So again, here quickly, I just mentioned it, but how we view and categorize as a summary level the 5 different areas of what we do. And then, as we look at it and say, okay, well, how do all this work get put on the queue, right? There's different levels of value and how we think about value in these different categories, but how do they get on our queue? So maintenance, for example, should be on our queue. This is very clear. We should schedule this a whole year in advance. We should be able to schedule the maintenance we need to do based on upgrades, the maintenance that we need to do based on cleaning up save searches, roles and permissions, and other stuff. All of this can be scheduled out for the entire year of all those different maintenance activities and just get it on your business system's schedule. Support, on the other hand, can't be scheduled at all, right? When your headlight goes out, you can't say, oh, well, I'll fix that in 3 months. You can't. You got to fix that headlight now. When your tire pops, you got to fix it now. So support is inherently reactive and ad hoc, and we need to make sure that our business systems team, whether that's internally or externally, has got some level of slack to deal with those issues as they arrive to get people back to the steady state. Now, the ergonomic optimizations, these are going to be coming in a lot of different ways, right? One is through, a simple ideas box, so to speak, right? For people to be giving those ideas day to day, whether that's, an online form or whatever, saying, hey, if I could do this, this would be better, and getting them over to your business systems team. But the reality is most end users don't even know what to ask for. So what we at Crow prefer to do is send what we call these quarterly pulse surveys, right? Where we go and ask end users to, rank their happiness on the system, but then also we ask a couple of questions that help us understand where there's areas of opportunity. Questions of saying, hey, if you were, the best developer in the world, what would you change about NetSuite to make your life easier, right? Or questions like, hey, in the last quarter, what's the thing that's taking you the most time on NetSuite to do? And getting users to give us feedback on that then gives experienced business systems professionals, they can read the responses there and say, hey, there's an opportunity. So again, pulse surveys is what we find the best way to get these value add things, raised into the queue, but obviously people can submit themselves. On the strategic side, we see customers all the time miss out on opportunity here because their business systems function is not directly tied in to the strategy of the business. And that's a huge opportunity and a huge miss for most companies. So what we recommend at Crow is typically at least twice a year, doing a half day to a full day working session where you get the executives online and we go through saying, here's the strategy of the company in the next 6 months. Here's what we're trying to achieve in our marketplace to further strengthen our market position. And then from that, we look at and say, okay, after that strategy session and where we're trying to go, what things can we do in the business system space to further support that company's strategy and those key strategy points? There's always a bunch in there, but what we see too often is that strategy is not, business systems isn't being brought in as part of the solution to the strategy, when all but certainly almost every strategic aid does have some level of business systems on it. And then finally, the new release, how do we schedule that in? Obviously, NetSuite upgrades twice a year, right? But thinking there's work before the upgrade of looking at all the new features. There's work after the upgrade of implementing all the new features that you want to get onto. All of a sudden, you start looking at all of this work, and there's a lot of different priorities to balance and a lot of work to do. So now to tie this all together, we talked about Evergreen, we talked about Agile and the need of continuously improving your system. We talked about how at Go Live, most people are usually only getting 30 or 40% of the theoretical value of the system. So how to get all of these 5 different categories together to make sure you're constantly making progress on your business systems environment and getting more and more value out of it. Doing that requires a structured, in our viewpoint, a structured agile approach where we're chunking out all the different work your business systems function needs to do, putting it into what we would call monthly sprints and saying, okay, in this sprint, here's all the different things we need to commit to the business that get done. That's maintenance, support, ergonomic, strategic, and release-based. Get all of that into that monthly sprint, have all the executives sign off that, yes, that's the stuff we need to work through in the sprint, and then deliver that on a month-by-month basis. That way, every month your business users are seeing that stuff come out. They're seeing that value being delivered, and they're getting faith, whether it's the executives on the strategic side, whether it's the end users on the ergonomic or support side, they're getting faith that they can put these things on the list and that they're going to be knocked out by your business systems function. Now, the tricky part is maintenance, support, ergonomics, strategic, new release, all of those require a ton of different skill sets, both technical, functional, project management skill sets, but also, for example, the new release requires that the people in your business systems function know the latest and greatest features, right? And that they're fully up to date on all the new features that are released every single time, right? And it requires for strategic stuff that the people who are designing your business systems have a real senior architect mindset to be able to tie those high-level strategy points from the executive committee into what should actually be done in the system, right? And then your team needs that ability to do the ad hoc support of supporting an end user who can't get a safe search or something right that isn't necessarily super high-skilled work, but is higher volume work that needs to be done, ideally at a lower cost. So you start looking at it and say, okay, well, in a business systems function, right, how do you actually accomplish that? Especially considering most NetSuite teams have, 1 to 4 people at most in the business systems function at most companies who run NetSuite. How do you get that diversity of skill set that actually solve all of the different types of problems you need to solve and get the value out of all the opportunities that you can to get your business systems continuously supporting your business? How do you do that? Well, it's very, very, very difficult to do that, especially when you only have 1 to 4 people. So at Crow, I'm going to end this session with a little commercial for how we've solved this. At Crow, we have an offering that we call Crow Y-Hire. Crow Y-Hire, we only work with companies after they are live on NetSuite. We plug in as if we are a single employee in your business systems team or your IT team. And what we do, though, is we don't bring one person. We bring a group of 12 people that represent all these different skill sets. We function as if we're one person. We're paid a salary as if we're one person on a salary schedule. Our contract is exactly the same as an employment contract, where you can, let us go on 2 weeks' notice, the same as you could an employee on your business systems team. But what we do is we come in and support. So if you've got 2 or 3 people internally, we can be that 3rd or 4th person to help bring this structure, help bring this mindset, help bring Agile and the DevOps tools, but to bring that senior technical and functional skill set, bring a junior technical and functional skill set, bring that knowledge of all the new releases to help drive forward your department to be the best business systems department you can be. So for more on that, you can scan this QR code, or you can reach out to me directly. And actually, I probably prefer just reach out to me directly at benkramer@crow.com, and we can help. But regardless of whether you want to leverage, a team like our Crow Y-Hire to be part of your team, or whether you want to accomplish that internally, the truth of the matter is, after you get live, you're only at 30 or 40% of the value. There's still 60 to 70% of the value of your business systems to go and capture, right? So you can add a ton of value to your organization through excelling at the maintenance, support, strategic, ergonomic, and new release actions, right? And when you do this, you'll really start seeing the full benefit of the investment you've made in your business systems, and specifically in NetSuite. Think about this, structure this. I'm happy to talk both about our Y-Hire offering, but also just if you want ad hoc advice about how to structure it within your organization, please don't hesitate to reach out to me here or come see us at our booth here at SuiteWorld. Many thanks for your time. It was a pleasure getting to go through the session with all of you, and wish you all the best in your journey forward with NetSuite. Thank you.